Okay, today our guest with us is Professor Julian May, who is a professor of developmental studies at the University of the Western Cape, where he is the director of the DSI NRF, which I will translate. It's the Department of Science and Innovation and the National Research Foundation, the Center of Excellence in Food Security. He also holds the UNESCO Chair in Science and Education for African Food Systems and has served on the National Planning Commission since 2022. Welcome, Professor May. It's nice to have you with us today.
Welcome.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, and it's a Friday afternoon and we've all had long and busy days. And as you said, you've just walked 15 kilometers with a group of young students. So we really appreciate you spending time with us today.
Unfortunately, it hasn't been as hot as it was last week.
Yes.
And you can be very glad about that.
Yes, indeed. So I think a good place to start is, what is the purpose of the Center of Excellence and the UNESCO Chair, and how do you work, and what are you hoping to achieve?
Well, Centers of Excellence were, in fact, a very innovative idea introduced by Minister Naledi Pandor about 20 years ago. She wanted to find ways of crowding in expertise in South Africa so that researchers from different disciplines would start to work together, and also researchers from different universities would work together. We tend to silo. We tend to be agricultural economists or agronomists or whatever, and not talk to other fields and disciplines. So she initially created 16 centers of excellence. Some of them are very specific. They focus on the metals used in the mining industry, as an example. We're a second generation center of excellence. We were created along with a center in communicable disease. And that was led by Salim Karem, who is, I think you will remember, very prominent during our COVID pandemic.
Yes.
So that's the kind of level that that is being pitched at. Our Center of Excellence is probably the only one which is as multidisciplinary as it is. We do everything from molecular biology through to the right to food. We've even commissioned a play on food and written poetry about food. And that's, food is fundamental to us. Food is so natural to us. I see us as boundary breakers. We're there to try and pull down the boundaries between different aspects of work that's around food. And ultimately, as I said, food is fundamental to us. It takes us back to the people who grow the food, the farmers, and it takes us forward, ultimately, the people who have to dispose of the waste that comes when we have consumed the food. So it's this whole, if you like, fork to table,
yes,
which is now being talked about.
Nice. So very interesting. But who's Julian May? Where do you come from? How did you get to this? Put it in a nutshell for us.
Yes, please do.
Well, that's an interesting question. I started my life as my working life as a young trainee economist.
Okay.
I was interested in understanding what big things cost. When I say big things, what does a rural infrastructure cost? What is the cost of a town? What is the cost of a development plan? I was fortunate to be put together with a sociologist in my very early studies. And we wound up doing research in what was then the Eastern Cape, what is now the Eastern Cape.
The Old Transkei.
The Old Transkei. And for me, it was a shock as a young white person in the 1970s to encounter what poverty meant. Because at that stage, this was a very, very poor area of South Africa. It still is one of the poorest areas. And so then my work was very dedicated around poverty and around the opposite of food, if you like, hunger.
Okay.
So most of my work over 30 years was around the topic of understanding poverty, understanding how to measure poverty, and understanding what to do about poverty. I was, in some ways, very lucky to be asked by my university to step into this role as the director of the Center of Excellence in Food Security. They didn't know that food actually is my hobby.
Okay.
I like to cook, I like to garden, I like reading about food. They said, Julian, you study hunger, could you study food? And I was like, yes, I'll do it. And also the second thing, which really why this has been important to me, is I don't like disciplinary boundaries at universities, and I really don't like ivory tower research, the kind of work that sits on the shelves. research must have a purpose. And the one
Yes.
thing about a center of excellence, the one thing that our funder drives us is, what is your impact? What is your societal impact? And so, that's part of me. I can talk about cooking if you like much longer, but I suspect that isn't what you want me to talk about.
How interesting. And, what you were saying about seeing grinding poverty and the effects of that on people. It's not just the nutrition. It's all the social effects and the mental effects and the psychological effects of that. It only takes people down a one-way street. And I mean, if you can turn that around and, alleviate the poverty, alleviate the hunger, and lift people up. I mean, it must be very good to see that when it is successful.
No, that is absolutely the case. Always my thought is, when you see someone who is very poor, a child that is very poor, and think, could this be, let's say an example from Worcester, could this be the John Coetzee? Could this be the David Kramer? Could this be one of the heroes of Worcester? And the only thing that stops that is the fact that this child is poor.
Yes.
Yes, yeah, it's so true. My wife was a teacher at a farm school, and there were kids in the class that is like they were literally gifted talents. There was a boy that he could play the piano on just on hearing the music, and there are really gifted kids in those classes. But they just do not have the opportunities. And even if they do get a glimpse of an opportunity, get to go to what we would have called a Model C school from way back when, is that they typically end up getting involved with the wrong crowd. And then it's back to square one. And if they stay on the farms, they will get involved with the wrong crowd, and they will just end up being tractor drivers on the farms.
Yeah, absolutely, that is the case. And I can give you a little personal example. As I live in McGregor, a village not very far from here, and I have been working now for the last 20 years with someone who, when I met him, he was a young farmer worker. I guess he's not so young anymore. But his maths mark in Standard 9 was higher than mine. But he had to be pulled out of school because his father got TB. So then we've lost talent. Literally, there's someone whose maths mark was higher than mine. I'm a professor of economics, and he is a farm worker.
Yes.
Yeah. So fighting poverty, it really, internationally and universally, it would be successful. It would be fantastic.
But I've got a question on that. Okay, if you talk about food security and feeding the people and all that, everybody thinks of the poor people. Is that we got to get food on their plates, get them to eat nutritionally. But what I'm interested, what's the flip side of that? How do we educate middle class and up as to what's the importance of their food? Because they can walk into a big name store and buy food, nutritional food. But how do we educate them and our kids as to not to waste food, how to look after food, how to for them to look after the poorer communities? Is that something that you guys work on?
Yes, it is, and I mean there's several ways in which you can think about approaching it. You've mentioned one important one: how not to waste food, or how to buy what you need and not always take that extra bit that you're not going to use and have to throw away. That's one part of it. One of the things that we are very interested in the work that we are doing here in the Breeda Valley is this idea of a localized food system. So now this has been tried in a number of parts of the world. In the USA, they talk about a localized food system being 100 miles. So essentially 100 miles radius around a town. So about 160 kilometers.
Yeah, I was about to say, for those that don't know what a mile is.
So it's about 160 kilometers. So if you put a compass and a map and do 160 kilometers around Worcester, I've looked at that, and with the research that we did here in 2019, where we surveyed 1,000 households in Worcester to understand what people bought and ate.
Okay.
I've also looked at the 2017 agricultural census that was produced by Stats SA to see what is produced in 160 kilometers radius. The implication is that people in Worcester could consume almost 70% of what they eat from the local area, from this 160-kilometer radius.
Yes, I understand that.
Now think about that. What does that mean for our farming community? If people in Worcester were consuming the local things rather than buying things that are grown, that might be grown in the USA or in Brazil.
You're leading up to the question that I wanted to ask you, which is here. It says, in the report submitted to the United Nations Food Systems Summit held in 2021, you described South Africa as having a food systems paradox. What does this mean? I think that ties in with what you were talking
Exactly. So in 2021, 2022, the UN system started this idea of a global food systems summit. And I think it was recognizing exactly what you both said. There's something wrong with our food, with the global food system. There's something wrong when a town like Worcester, where we are surrounded by broiler farms, but when I walk down the street, I can buy frozen chickens that's been imported from Brazil. There's something odd about that. So the Food Systems Summit was supposed to address this. Our centre was asked by the Food and Agricultural Organization and the European Union to prepare the report for South Africa. And then pulling all that, we ultimately were pulling together almost 10 years of research to do that report. What was striking, we grow enough food in South Africa. We have some of the best farmers in the world. They can compete with a demanding environment, which is the European market, to be able to grow and sell our products at a good price. And I think any table grape farmer in the Hector River Valley would tell you that. You've got to be good. Not only good, yes, you have to be excellent. So these are the farmers that we've got. We produce more food than we need. We export our food. And we do that consistently. Unless there's a very severe drought, we grow the food that we need. Not only that, we have top quality scientists at every university in our country. We have the science and the knowledge to keep up. We can breed our own plants. We can engage with high-level technologies like genetic engineering. We can do all of that and keep up. We are world leaders in the designing of packaging to be able to export our crops. And then lastly, we've got food policy coming out of our ears. Again, ask any farmer and he'll tear his hair out saying, there's so much legislation. But we've got all the policies of every other country in the world, and it's not only policies about growing food, it's policies about the processing of food, it's policies about food safety, all of it we have in place. And yet, almost a third of our population are below a food poverty line. They don't have enough money to buy food. 1/4 of our children are stunted. That is high by anyone's standard. When you compare it to countries that are as rich as South Africa, we're an outlier. And stunting is a long-term outcome of malnutrition when you're very young, and it's permanent. The damage that is done is permanent. So we actually have alarming food system outcomes. And that's the paradox. How do we explain our ability to grow the food, our ability to keep up with the fact that such a large share of our population are food insecure? And the last part of that is we also have some of the highest prevalences of obesity and overweight in the world. And as a result, we have very high prevalence of diabetes. And this is overweight and obesity that's not because people are too rich and are eating large quantities of food. It's because they are eating the wrong kind of food. And they can't afford to buy that. So that's the paradox that we were drilling down and saying, how do we fix this? Because it's actually fixable. That's the thing. We have a problem which is fixable. We're not like Malawi, which doesn't have enough food. We're not like other countries in South Asia who don't have a policy, who can't govern the food system.
It's very interesting what you're saying, and you know, I'm from this area, and a lot of what you've described is stuff that we've just kind of taken for granted. But if you're saying that, like, the farmers in our area are producing fruit, which they don't even consider selling locally because they don't get the returns that they require to run their farms from the local market. So the people that are producing and packing the food are looking at this food passing under their noses, and they don't get to eat that because they can't afford it. So it's economics, and I mean, we're really up against a difficult one here with that.
We are. I mean, I think the answer to the paradox, the immediate answer to the paradox, we all know. It's unemployment. We have high and consistent levels of unemployment. We need to understand why we have unemployment. What is it about our economy which is not leading to the jobs that we would hope? Those are the kinds of difficult questions, and they aren't easy to answer, and they're very uncomfortable to answer, because then you're starting to say, well, where are the jobs being generated? Isn't it worrying that we are more willing to invest, our business community might be more willing to invest their money in Brazil or Nigeria than in South Africa? How do we move to a way where it is attractive to invest in this country rather than in another one?
Yeah. So one of the questions we have for you is, you started working in the Bredie River Valley in 2019. What was the reason for choosing here?
This was an interesting thing that actually started in a strategic workshop that we had near Toes River in 2019. It's a coincidence that it was Toes River. We try and do, each year we call it...
When you say we, who's at this workshop?
So the workshop is the principal investigators in the Centre of Excellence. So these are drawn mostly from UWC, the University of Western Cape, and the University of Pretoria. And typically we also then have some people from Stellenbosch University, from the University of Cape Town. We would include some stakeholders, so that might be people from the local authority if we are in a particular area, maybe from other parts of government, and we include some of our students. So it's a group of people that help us think through what we should be doing. At the meeting in 2019 in Toes River, we were fortunate to be joined by a colleague that had been seconded from the French Agricultural Research Institute, CIRAD.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, he made this very interesting input where he spoke about the French notion of terroir, of territory. And he said to us, you're very focused on what is grown and what policies are written and what economic sectors should be supported. But he said people don't live in sectors, they live in places. And he said what the movement in Europe was towards an idea of a place-based research or a territory-based research. Understand what happens in a particular place, and you'll start to understand how the food system is actually operating. And we really liked that idea, and we sort of said, well, which place? And then we said, well, what about here? Now, why here? Why the Bredie Valley? The first is the diversity of its agricultural economy. It's, where we were close to the table grapes. You come down here, there's other crops. There's the figs, there's the persimmons, there's now nut trees being planted. There's a huge diversity.
It's extremely diverse.
Yeah.
You can buy from cherries to figs to nuts to, as you say, persimmons. They're all being grown within a 40, 50 kilometer radius from here.
And meat production is slowly picking up as well.
Yeah.
So we're only talking about produce being grown, but the majority of meat production area is chickens, but there's a little bit of other stuff popping up here and there as well.
You've got the pork, you've got people doing wild meat, you've got people growing people producing mushrooms.
Yes.
There's so much going on here, so that was a huge attraction. Secondly, there's a good database. There's lots of information available. Thirdly, and I really mean this, I think you have a fabulous municipality. Maybe as residents you might grumble about things not working out.
Yeah, there will always be somebody grumbling about something.
But actually, the local authority works, which means we can understand the food system without always going back to the problem actually is the local municipality. Okay. We can rule that one out. The municipality does what it's supposed to do, and we can focus on the other kinds of things that could make for a better food system. Then you've got a population, and unfortunately, Worcester, like hundreds of South African towns, still has what I've called the apartheid landscape.
Yes.
You've got rich people who are mostly white in one part of town, and you eventually wind up with poor people who are mostly African living next to the river. That's the nature of the town. That means that we can statistically model what happens in Worcester, and we can probably apply it to Bloemfontein or to Vredendal or to 100 other towns in South Africa which look like this. So we can use Worcester as a model, and we can say, if this works here, or if this doesn't work here, then it's likely to be the same in many Platteland towns. And the last thing, why not Cape Town? Why not Johannesburg? I think our research team has concluded that South Africa is in desperate need of what's called elsewhere rural revitalization.
Yeah.
For sure.
We need towns like Worcester and towns like Bloemfontein or Vredendal to flourish, because otherwise everyone is flocking into the metropolitan areas and they're not coping.
Yeah, well, if you look at some of these rural towns, I remember when I grew up in Mariesburg. There's a small, for the people who don't know, it's a small town in the Swartland, and it's mostly wheat production around it. 15 kilometers from there is a tiny town called Koringberg.
I know Koringberg.
When I was at school, my father told me that you could not buy a plot in Koringberg for 50 rand. Now it's like as if a lot of people from Cape Town just semigrated out there, set up. So the rejuvenation of the Platteland, in my opinion, has been people with capital that could do that, and it's not necessarily coming from inside the areas. Am I correct in saying that?
I think there's that. But I do think there's a lot of potential.
Yes.
I was answering a query by one of our Belgium colleagues today who said, where do the wealthy people shop? And I said, I think a fair number of them drive down to the shopping malls at Cape Town.
Yeah. Or Paul.
Or Paul. Rather than the money flowing around here, which is a great pity, because here's where we can generate jobs, and here's there's land available. It's not like Cape Town where you think, where are the next 10,000 people going to live? So that's why we felt, firstly, it's an approach which has allowed us to embed ourselves in the local community, work very closely with the municipality. It gives us an opportunity to provide feedback. Well, this is what we found, and maybe something might be of use.
Worcester's always been a very much a centre for a large area around it because of the topography of the mountains around here. From Worcester, you can go on the N1 north towards the Durance. You can go drive due north towards Ceres and Tilburg, and then you can go to Cape Town, and you can go to Villiersdorp Way, and you can go to Robertson Way. So there are 5 major roads leading out of Worcester, which makes it very much a centre. So it influences more than just its own area. It has a very large draining area where people would come here from Ceres to do their grocery shopping, or Robertson. So it's a central place like that.
On that topic, and I'm going to name the retailer, is talking about 4 or 5 years ago, just before COVID, I think, I was standing in Woolworths, and I was looking to buy a shirt, and they didn't have the right size shirt on the shelf. But nobody knew what was going on. And I made a bit of a stink about it, and you've got something on special that you want to buy, but you don't have the stock, and so forth. So I ended up I put it on their Facebook thing. It was one of those moments I was just really pissed off with this whole thing, and put it on their Facebook. And about 2 months later, I got a phone call from Woolworths head office saying, has my query been resolved? I said, goodness, if you take this long to phone me back after my post, I don't know when the query will be resolved. But anyway, I ended up getting a phone call from the store manager. And I said to them, where do you service? Because if you drive from here to Paarl, it's 40 kilometers. It's going to cost you, go back 5 years, let's say 400 Rand, including the tunnel, toll fees and whatever. Yet you can get in your car, 40 minutes later, you're in a Woolworths that's got everything. In Worcester, they had pajamas for men and underpants and socks. And our food section was like very small and limited. Yet it services an area probably 50 times the size of what Paarl services. And Paarl's got 4 Woolworths shops in there. But I think that's where corporates don't they think of platteland as, or the rural countryside as just
The bush.
they're the bush? Yes.
Yes, indeed. You're absolutely right, and people don't realize. The passerby does not realize how important Worcester is to the whole of the North Boerland, that it drains people from. All you have to do is go into Worcester's hospitals, and you ask people, where are you from? No, I'm from here, and I'm
Yes.
from there, and I'm from there. They've come from a long distance, and this is where they come.
Right.
So it makes sense that you would have chosen that for the food systems as well.
But just this week, I was in Limpopo, flew back yesterday, and I was in the old Nailstrom Moli now, and if you drive on the N1 North, you just see a board that says Moli, and I've driven past there a couple of times, and I just knew where it was, and I thought Nailstrom was this tiny little speck. Anitar Road was the main road with potholes, and it's a bloody big place. It's like a proper centre.
And those are exactly the kinds of towns I'm hoping our research will contribute towards developing, because we could have done research in an area like that, but then we lack the diversity. Always to understand someone whose background is in statistics, diversity matters. We need variation in information, because then we're able to start to say, if we change this might happen. Could I give you an example of something
Please do.
which we've been working on, which is exactly this?
We are here to listen.
So this idea of a place-based, of a territory-based project then was something we developed. We put it to our funder agreed, and then we started looking for resources to be able to do the work. So we had some money of our own from the National Research Foundation, but we needed more. In doing that, we've been quite fortunate. We've now won 2 European Union competitive bids. It's something called Horizons 2020. And that means that we have collaborators in other countries. The one group which have done exactly this kind of modeling work is from Vrije University in Amsterdam. It's one of the very prestigious universities in the Netherlands. And their question has been, if we make certain policy decisions, how will that impact upon some of those food system outcomes that I was talking about earlier? The one which they've chosen was dietary diversity. So this is an indicator of a food system. It says the more varied your diet is, the healthier you will be. Okay, so on average, South Africans eat about 5 food groups. We ought to be close to 8.
Okay.
So we are, on average, again, a poor indicator. We need to be higher. So using our data and using this kind of statistical modeling that we can do, we can now then identify down to essentially a block in Worcester. So down to
A street block.
A street block. So a small unit of analysis. What would happen if the municipality made certain policy decisions? So we did a range of policy decisions. We included even something as simple as putting in bicycle paths. So that's the kind of detail that we can do. So what if the municipality had dedicated lines where people could ride their bicycles so that they could move around the city more easily? The one that made the biggest difference, if we could promote more people on the street selling fruit and vegetables. So as you have down, I think it's Durban Road.
Yes.
As you have on the Zwela Timber Corridor, a variety of these places where you have people selling fruit and vegetables, actually that turns out to be good for everybody in Worcester.
Oh, wow.
If people can access those fruit and vegetables easily.
I 100% agree with you, because and we go into the local grocery stores and you buy your fruit and stuff for the kids and whatever, and because we work in the industry, we know where that kind of stuff comes from, and we can often identify some of our clients on those boxes. But the people that can't, and often the people just don't go to that section. But if there was 10 stalls,
If it were under their nose,
yes,
and it were
well,
affordable.
that's what exactly what I want to say.
And it's a small enough quantity.
And it's
Because again,
affordable.
remember, many of the people that we're buying that either don't have a refrigerator.
Yes.
Some people live in environments where you can't actually keep food because there's a risk that someone's going to kick in your door and steal your food when you're not there.
Yeah.
because people are living in very unsafe environments. So it's about the smallness of the unit. It's about the cost of transporting. If a woman buys a big bag of groceries in the center of town and takes it to Zwela Timber, she's going to pay more for her taxi ride.
Yes.
And that's...
Or it will be a schlep because she's got to carry it
Or she's got
2
to
kilometers to where the taxi is.
But I've also heard that if you get on the taxi, the size of the bag you're carrying depends.
I didn't know that.
You will
Yes.
you will be charged more. We've established this.
Oh.
So by making more trading, these kinds of things available, why it would have a positive impact on your high income neighborhoods. Well, high income people unfortunately go and buy the bag of pretzels or the bag of Doritos.
Yes.
Rather than buying the fresh fruit. And so here's a very simple policy decision. My sense is, in fact, this council is actually reasonably sympathetic towards these street hawkers. Other municipalities are hostile.
Yes.
They chase them. They see it as a nuisance and a mess.
It's a very difficult one, because if you've got a...
It could become a mess.
It could become a mess.
It could easily become a mess. And also, if somebody's paying retail rental space and they're selling tomatoes inside, but there's someone outside the door selling tomatoes as well.
Yeah, but they make enough money on the deodorants and the toilet paper and stuff like that.
But you understand that there's an argument for this. I hear you, but I also agree that if you live in a suburban area, if there was somebody a block away from you with a little grocery store, you'd probably support them.
Yes, we had it at right in our street. We had a shop that it was like a neighborhood, like stop and bread and milk shop, and then it was bought over, and it became we would often, like on a Friday afternoon, we want to buy a piece of meat. We'd actually go and buy it at that shop there. But 2 years ago, it was sold to foreigners, and it's gone downhill. Like it tanked. So it's nice back to a spaza shop kind of vibe when you walk in there.
Yeah, I mean, I can't divulge the name of the companies because I signed an ethics agreement with them. But I don't mind calling out the big grocery chains because they make enough money. I'm using the Dewald. But we interviewed the managers of 2 of the big retail outlets in Worcester. We asked them this exact question that you've raised there, Louise. What about the fact that these people, you've got people selling the same things that you've got inside the shop, outside the front door? And they said, where do you think they bought it from?
It's free enterprise, I suppose.
Where do you think they bought it from? He said they buy a big bag of apples like this. They open it up. They sell 5. They sell the apple with a markup on the bulk buy. But the thing is that they're selling to a person who wants to buy 2 apples.
Yes.
We want to sell a bag of apples.
Yes.
Well, then if that's the case, then by all means.
They were perfectly happy. And then, as you said, they made. The markup on food tends to be pretty low at the best of times. They make their money on the other items.
Yes.
So if
the impulse buys.
Yeah. So someone goes in and buys the bread, the loaf of bread, and the milk, and all the rest of it, and the deodorant. That makes the money. If they walk out and buy 3 tomatoes, as far as the managers of these shops were concerned, this was not a problem. This makes my shop more attractive to come to.
Even for the people that are buying retail and selling 2 at a time.
But Worcester's actually got a very healthy hawker community. Yes. Even down the road, just on the way to the mall, there's often people selling whatever's in season at the moment. It will be grapes. I don't tend to buy grapes from because we know what good grapes
You see watermelons, you see
watermelons, peaches, a variety of stuff.
Have you seen these people?
We've seen these people. We've spoken. In fact, so I tend to make a point of a particular trader in Worcester whenever I visit here.
I'm sure you can mention him.
No, I've signed a disagreement. I can't mention.
Give him some free exposure.
But what was the first time I walked past him, I had to do a double take because he was selling okra, or I call it bindi because I was born in Durban, or lady's finger.
Yes.
Is the different names of it. And I came to a halt and I went back to him. I said, I have not seen okra since
Where are you finding this?
Yeah,
yes.
You see it very few and far between.
Yeah. And so he is one of the people who have moved to South Africa from South Asia, and he said He actually knows someone in Montague who grows this, and the community, the immigrants from South Asia are very keen. And I said, well, are you noticing South Africans starting to acquire the taste? And he said, yes, because the West Africans like this as well. So there are other people from other parts of Africa that like the food, and slowly South Africans are picking up this taste.
Okay.
So somewhere in Montague there's a farmer that's found a niche in what actually is a high value crop.
Is that not incredible?
But
Isn't
now,
that lovely?
what I'm curious about is that farmer, is he making a decent profit of growing okra?
I'm an economist. My view would be if he wasn't, he would stop.
Yes, exactly.
Good point.
That's how economists think.
Good point.
Important agricultural food chains in the area. We've
Now that
kind
one-
of touched on it, but maybe you want to expand on that a little bit more.
So that is an interesting one. As I've said, we've been trying to crowd in lots of research into the Brodie Valley of different kinds. So sometimes it might be research about the breastfeeding of children, which is a topic we've worked on here. This topic is again being undertaken by CIRAD, our French collaborator, and they specialize in the analysis of value chains and how to make value chains more efficient and operate better. So we looked at what's grown in the Brodie Valley, and it's, as we said, hugely diverse. Wound up picking 2 crops to understand better. The obvious one was the table grapes. It's the most exported fruit from South Africa. It's one of our biggest products in terms of its value. It's highly organized, and yet maybe it's quite fragile.
Very fragile.
Climate change will affect it. The conditions, the working conditions on the farms might affect it. It's a very competitive market with lots of new entrants. So it's a sector which information could be of use. So we focused on understanding the table grapes better. The other one, and my French colleagues kept on saying, "Are you mad, Julian?" I said, "Butternuts."
I remember you talking about the butternuts.
So they've kept on, they eventually made them research butternuts. Now it turns out butternuts and pumpkins are South Africa's biggest vegetable export.
Okay.
I didn't know that, but
I had an inkling because I know butternut exports are a big thing.
Yeah.
So it's growing rapidly. Butternuts have become a very desirable food in Europe. I think it's because of people reducing the amount of meat that they're eating. I think it's a good vegan option for people.
And 20 years ago, they didn't know butternuts in Europe.
So now there's a huge demand for our butternuts. It used to be mostly the UK, but now a significant share are going in via the Netherlands into Europe. But I was alerted to butternuts not because of the statistics that I'd looked at, but was actually a remark made by one of the people we interviewed, a government official that we interviewed. You might know the name, but I can't share it.
Yeah.
Who talked about his experience during COVID. And he said during COVID, the NGO and the church that he was working for was able to feed people because they were being donated butternuts by the butternut farmers. And it made me realize, unlike table grapes, where most of it's exported and not much of it, although a significant share of the crop is consumed in South Africa, but not much of it necessarily finds its way to the poor consumer. Butternuts are a crop which you can export and make money, and you can sell what you don't export or what is a bit small or it has a sting on it or whatever. You can sell it locally.
And they're not that perishable.
Yes,
And
and
they're
they're
not-
tough.
They can hang around for a bit.
You can chuck it on the ground. It's not gonna
Yes.
burst really.
Exactly.
It's nourishing. It's got a very high nutrient value. It's quick to prepare. I think that's another reason why butternuts are desirable. I read an article, I think it was about Jamie Oliver promoting butternuts about 15 years ago. And he said, but the big advantage for him as a cook is that it cooks quickly. If you cook a turnip or the alternative kinds of vegetables that they were using in Europe before they had our butternuts, that takes a long time to cook. Whereas a butternut actually cooks pretty quickly.
And another thing about something like butternuts versus table grapes is that butternuts can be a cash crop, and it's a 1-year thing.
Right.
You
So
can actually produce more than one crop in a year if you
You can, But the point is, table grapes, it's a long-term commitment to grow table grapes. Whereas butternuts, you can even, if you're a table grape farmer and you're leaving your field fallow, not growing grapes, you could actually use that for butternuts.
And also with table grapes, is from one season to the next, the people might just turn around and say, I don't want this cultivar anymore, I want that. And then it takes 3 years to re-establish that. And then by that time, they've changed their minds again.
So a lot of farmers, it's kind of a quick speculative farming operation that happens in between other things.
You're the biggest butternut cultivator in the Breeda Valley is also one of your biggest table grape farmers. Exactly what you're saying. It's a quick cash turnaround. It's there if things go wrong. It's like taking insurance.
Yes.
And I think tomatoes are somewhat the same. It's another crop which you can put in quickly. It's a nice high value cash crop. It's there in case things go wrong.
Obviously, a lot more perishable. However, it's also another 1 year turnaround kind of cash crop.
So I think one of the insights that came out of this, I mean, I always knew farmers were good businessmen, but this showed again that ability to be able to use this natural resource of the land and the water in ways that you can start. You develop a diversified income stream. Again, something that I wonder whether our Department of Agriculture realizes. Is this being recognized that this kind of diversification is good? Can we think about this as a way of also bringing in more smallholder farmers so that we can get more of our population farming? And I think about those smallholder agriculturalists as being important because a huge problem in Europe now, and I think it's one that we're going to start facing, is an aging farming population.
Oh, yes.
So definitely, it's already there in South Africa. The average age of farmers in South Africa is 63.
Yeah. Now that puts all of us at huge risk. And I think, and it's sending a signal. It's something about why would the son or daughter of a farmer want to become a farmer when they can see now what work it is, the work that is required, the risk that is required. So we need new generations of farmers, and that might mean different ways, different kinds of farms.
If I might add to that, because I've spent a week in Limpopo now, which is actually quite good because it was completely different as to what we are used to down here. We saw mealies and popcorn and tobacco and things like that being grown, which is really cool for me because you don't get to interact with those kind of crops down here. Is that the farmers we went to, they were middle-aged, 50 plus, maybe a little bit older, and some of them have got kids coming in, but it's the young people up there, they don't tend to stay there.
Right.
Where down here in the Western Cape is that when a farmer's got 3 sons, he would bring them in, but he would say, okay, right, 2 of them might not be interested in farming at all, but one will become a CA and the other one will do something in marketing, and they will become part of the business, and it will become a corporation type business, where it's still a family business, but of the kids, they might not even be farming. They might just have managers doing the actual farming, and the rest they do is all in the background, the business side. Whereas I think up country, it's a little bit more. If you talk farmers up there, it's I don't think that is really there yet. I might be completely wrong.
You were also describing how difficult life is there and how tough things are. Yeah. And how self-sufficient people you need to be. And so that's not attractive for a youngster to come and farm under those difficult circumstances.
I'm a curious person. I ask questions the whole time. So now we're driving around and talking to people, and if you can call a spade, the white community there, they're not registered to vote. They
don't care. Given up.
That is the word.
They've given up. That's the word.
They've given up. That is the thing. And yet I'm very hopeful for what's coming.
Well,
but I think they're so used to just trying to survive on their own, make their piece of ground work for them, that they've, like you said, given up
on support.
I mean, I think that describes the feelings of many South Africans that we've. I came into the post 1994 thinking, well, there's so much a government can do, and we'll fix everything. And 30 years down the line, I now realize that actually governments can do very little, and we need to find new ways of working. Now, let me take the researcher hat off for a minute, and I haven't had a chance to speak about the UNESCO chair, but maybe another day. 2 years ago, I received a letter signed by the president. I was amazed, inviting me onto the National Planning Commission. My first comment to my wife was, we must really be in difficulty now. I study poverty, hunger and death. And I've been invited onto the National Planning Commission. Things can't be going well. But it's been a very interesting experience. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that because it is of relevance to what we're speaking about here. One of the first things we had as the new commission now that is presented with the National Development Plan. We're due to achieve those targets in 2030.
Okay. So sorry if I interrupt you. Is this now you get together and the president is in an actual meeting together with everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
We're presented with the National Development Plan, and at that point, the chair of the Planning Commission is a minister within the president's office, and he said to us, "You might have to be the Planning Commission to tell South Africa we're not going to achieve these targets." And it was a shock. It was a shock to think about that, and that a huge sense of responsibility. One of the first things that the Planning Commission had to think about, and this is now early 2022, was obviously energy, the lights, because we're all going mad without our lights. And in trying to think that through, it was a case of saying, what's stopping us from getting towards more renewable energy? We have sun, wind, it's blowing like mad outside. How can we not have renewable energy? And one of the things which was discovered was just this maze of red tape that's being created, that at every instance stops the private sector from investing. Unfortunately, we wrote a stern note. So that's already all the Planning Commission can do is call people together and write a stern note, a bit like a headmaster at a school. We wrote a stern note.
To the president.
We wrote a stern note saying, we don't have power because of red tape. Unfortunately, there is a process within the president's office, Operation Woodentlela, which is about cutting red tape. And you might have noticed the red tape is slowly being cut.
Yes.
Slowly we're seeing
millimeter at a time.
Millimeter at a time, but the red tape is starting to be cut. And this is, it's of significance to this area. You already have a solar farm at Toesrivier. You're about to get a number more going up there.
Yes.
That area, which was told to us was the municipality's greatest concern, Toes River, has the potential to have a boom. With all those farms going in, with all those with the construction taking place, with the social development funding, if I had more money in my pension pot, I would buy a house in Toes River.
And houses are cheap there.
Sure, but you've got so much going on there. There are going to be new developments in Maatjiesfontein linked to the telescope. So there's lots going on there.
And also Laingsburg. Laingsburg is busy booming.
Yeah. So it was a case in this instance, and it will take time. The biggest constraint there is for renewable energy actually are the power lines. Because now we have to have power lines not running from the coal station, from the coal area.
You have to, yes, I understand.
They have to come from the Northern Cape. So that's going to be the big thing. But again, there's new things that are moving along with that. Why it's of relevance to this conversation is as we've been looking into this, one of the things that we have identified, government has no money. There's no money. We saw that in this budget. There's just enough to keep us going. That doesn't mean the country doesn't have enough money. There's money around. There's money to build shopping malls, which we don't need. There's money to develop parts of the centre of Cape Town and build high-rise buildings, which we don't need. So there's money around, and actually my view is, and I think it's shared by other commissioners, the problem is that the private sector is afraid of investing that money on things which we do need.
Yes.
And foreigners are afraid that their investment might be stolen. Yeah.
Yes. So it's one of the things then is about can we build trust, and whether it's about trust between the private investor and the national government, or the private investor and a provincial or a municipal government, because municipalities can actually raise funds. They can raise investment funds and can be brokers in this. So if you have a credible municipality, potentially it has the ability to be able to be a partner in a public-private investment that could be trusted.
Okay, sorry if I may stop you there. I just want to make sure that I understand it correctly. So let's say a town like Worcester or Mossel Bay or wherever can get enough private people together to fund a solar farm for that place. It is a possibility that they can build their own power generation.
Yeah, there's red tape that needs to be cut still, but in theory, Worcester is the Breda Valley municipality has a credit rating, like the city of Cape Town has a credit rating.
Okay.
And that, it's one of the things that's happening is that the city of Cape Town now is talking to investors like the World Bank and saying,
they're amazing. We just looking in awe at what's happening in Cape Town.
The same could apply to other municipalities. You wouldn't do it at the same scale, but let's say if it's a solar farm, or if it's something which has been talked about, which we've heard, the idea of a fresh produce market. Could a fresh produce market generate a livelihoods for people living in Worcester? We had a market here, rather than going to Epping and bringing the food back from Epping.
Yes.
Now that is something
interesting
where
concept.
You could potentially say, as a municipality, and if the municipality is trusted, could one of those companies up the road that are doing well be interested in becoming a co-investor in something like that? That's the kind of thing which we could be thinking about. What about the possibility of, again, getting our rail service running so that we're not dealing with trucks on the highway? We can rail in much more stable conditions the table grapes to the harbour. If we get Cape Town can be persuaded, can you invest in a better harbour, a better port facility?
I don't think you need to persuade Cape Town for that. They've been persuaded 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's when we say we need to look at innovative funding instruments, ways in which those with money are willing to part with it because they feel secure that they're going to get it back.
Yes. Okay, everything we've spoken about now is Western Cape. Again, if you go up country, they joke to you. You was from Cape Town. Things work there. We just have to make our own way. How do we shift that mentality of hope, like what? Because this is hope, over to the rest of the country. Because I think they've lost hope.
I think it goes back to my feeling about platteland towns. There's a resilience in places like this.
They're incredibly resilient, those people.
They had to be.
They've had to be 10 times more resilient than people where there is a functioning municipality.
Yeah. So I wouldn't necessarily say, well, can we get hope back in Johannesburg metropolitan area? I think that let's wait for the bun fight of the next couple of months to see how that one goes. But I do think we could look at it. My brother lived in a town called Smithfield, near Bloemfontein. It needs work. But I also was interested in talking to the councillor in Smithfield, a Free State town, who had ideas. And I joined their Facebook group, and they're also talking and say, how can we make our town work? Can we talk to, again, the supermarket chain that's here, and think about encourage them to buy some of the things that are grown in our area? So I have quite a lot of faith in like I say, small town resilience, and whether it's in the Free State or in KwaZulu-Natal. As I said, I'm originally from KwaZulu-Natal. I have a huge soft spot for towns like Ishawi. where you've got a farming community which supports that. You've had a long history. And while people might disagree, and while there are still racial issues that have to be resolved, we are from this place, and we're going to make it work.
This is who we are.
This is who we are.
And we've got to make it work. One of the tools that you've been using is the learning journeys. What are these, and who have been involved in the learning journeys?
So learning journeys are something which came out of our colleagues from Stellenbosch University. And it's based on something I've always believed, in a recognition that we people at universities are not the experts. It's the people doing things on the street, the farmers. They are the experts, and what we've got to learn is how to learn. My colleague who is involved in learning journeys talks about listening and listening again. And that's what the learning journey is about. We listen and you listen again. So these involve taking groups of researchers, other stakeholders. We've taken councillors, we've taken the people from the Breda Valley municipality out of their office. And like I did today, they've walked for 15 kilometers talking to people, and we set up interactions along the road so that the person who is selling fruit and vegetables knows that these people are coming to talk to them, is ready to say, this is exactly what it's like, and this is my problem, and this is why I think you could be doing better. Thank you very much.
Okay.
We've had the head of the Western Cape Department of Agriculture has participated and has walked with us.
Imagine being a fly on the wall for this must
Dr.
be quite
Silupeta.
something.
Yeah, he came to Toes River.
Lovely guy.
Walked with us in Toes River.
Yeah.
See.
But it must be incredibly interesting to witness this interaction.
They are really great. They're quite inspiring. The only thing that bothers me about the learning journeys is I've observed that if you take a government official and you show them something which is really uncomfortable to see, the Early Childhood Development Centre that can't feed children in a clean environment, they start to make promises they can't keep. Because they want to help. They actually, as the person, one of the senior people said to us, I want to help. I don't want to wake up and go to my office and feel that I'm useless. But then you realize as they're talking, you don't have the mandate to do that. You're going to have to bring someone else in. So one of the things we do in the learning journey is if someone says, I promise to give you this, we say, okay, you can't do that, but that person over there can. And that's the kind of matchmaking that happens.
And there's nothing worse than over-promising and under-delivering.
But do you go up front and you kind of know what the issues is going to be, so you've got the right people in the crowd doing this?
Yes, we do try and do that. And so and the learning journeys do tend to have a particular theme.
Okay.
So as an example of a learning journey, we walked from the formal part of Zwelathemba up to Mandela Park, and this Mandela Square. And we visited all along the early childhood development centres, from very formal ones, well established in schools, through to ones that were in shacks. And we took with us people who were able to do something about this. And that included I can say the name, the Do More Foundation, who I think does fantastic, Do More Foundation, who do, I think, fantastic work in this area, as providing meals and support for the early childhood development centres. And so, they came with us and they were able to say, this is where we actually can help. So those are the kind of structured ones. The Toes River one was the interesting one because we had said to the municipality, we'll give you a learning journey, you choose. What do you want us to do? And they said, we want you to go there. One of your councillors was very adamant, and it was interesting because in this instance, it was a councillor from one political party who recommended us to go to an area which is run by another political party. That councillor greeted us, and all I could think to myself was, this is how mature democracy works.
It's supposed to work.
That's how it's supposed to work. You're now in the same municipality. The fact that you are in opposition parties doesn't mean that you shouldn't work together. And again, I've took that as a very positive signal.
That's how it's supposed to work, and not be as polarized as things have sometimes got. So then there are several international partners involved in your research. Who are they, and why have you chosen to work with them?
So I've already mentioned CIRAD.
Yes, you did.
And CIRAD has always focused on agriculture in developing countries. its original focus, in fact, was how to make France's colonies pay for themselves.
Oh, interesting.
That is what and they're quite clear. They say that to me.
France's colonies pay for just
Pay for themselves.
Yeah. So how to get agriculture functioning effectively in the French colonies was there was what was there.
And French colonies is now where they've colonized across the world.
Yes.
Okay.
So in those days it would have been Algeria.
Yes.
And,
Large parts of Africa and some parts
Canada.
yeah.
Yes, and islands in the Indian Ocean.
So that was the kind of work they do. Now they're interested in how to get France's trading partners to work better. So it isn't altruism. They're not there. They're it's self-interest, and I like that. I can work with self-interest. So their interest is how ultimately how can we have a better trading relationship with South Africa. We're working Freya University Amsterdam. I've already mentioned them, and there it's the Department of Environmental Science. And again, why that department? One of our big concerns is climate change, and they are some of the foremost modelers of the impact of climate change and what you can do about it. And then the partner which I spoke about earlier, which are the group that are in town today.
Yes, it would be nice to hear more about that.
So that's the Catholic University Leuven. I didn't know very much about it, but Leuven, KUL turns out to be the Cambridge of Belgium. It's a highly prestigious, very old university. I came across them because I have a South African PhD student who is I'm co-supervising with KUL. And she approached me and said, she's an architect, and would I supervise her? And I said, I'm an economist. How can I supervise you? So she said, no, I'm interested in urban design. I'm interested in how cities can become more livable places. And I like the work you're doing on food systems. So I agreed to supervise her. Now they have a very interesting thing when you want to do a PhD in KUL. You need also to learn to become a teacher. It's not just about going and writing a long thesis. It's about you're going to become a professor, so you must learn how to do this. So one of the things that she has had to do...
Very important.
I think it's a great idea. I think we should start this in South Africa. So one of the things that she's been charged to do is to bring out a group of master students who are doing urban design. They are 45. They come from all over the world. Peru, Mexico, Ireland, all sorts of countries are there. So
and at what age are these students?
I'd say they're in about 25 to...
Okay, mid-20s.
Probably not more than their mid-20s. They are a mix of town planners, architects and the like. And we have teamed them up with a group of University of Western Cape students, UWC students, who are doing development studies. So again, many of your municipal officials went through our degree.
Okay.
So that's why I think your municipality works so well. It's because they were trained by UWC.
There you go. Okay.
So they're here now. They call it a design studio. It looks quite a lot like a learning journey. And so they have been spending this week and part of next week, literally, I've heard someone call it deep hanging out.
Okay.
They go to a part of Worcester and they observe. They talk to people and they look at how the food system is operating. Why I think it's such fun. As I mentioned, I'm an economist. We call it the dismal science. I'm there to tell you how much things cost and why it won't work. They are design people. New ideas. So one of the things they've been told to do is imagine Worcester. Imagine what Worcester could be.
Reimagine it.
Just reimagine it. Think of it if the farming community and the city were more integrated. Think if these open spaces that you've got were somehow different. And they've really seized the challenge. So I've been hearing wonderful ideas all day about what they will do. Their next step is they present next week what they've seen. They go back to Belgium.
We've been invited to the presentation.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Yes.
nice.
It's going to be at the local resort. They go back then to Belgium and they will go into the studio with their drawing boards and the like, and they will reimagine Worcester.
And that will then be sent through to the municipality?
That's it. So we will have
Oh, wow.
a whole lot of new ideas of what Worcester could be. Now, some of it may not be possible ever. Some of it might be something, well, we hadn't thought about that. We can't do it, but we could do that. Some of it might be what your new vegetable market might look like, fresh produce market might look like. So earlier today, they were taking measurements at the station, the old station, and
Good heavens.
just talking about what it could be. So one of the things I would like when we'll end this project toward probably at the end of this year, and we've committed that we will bring all the information back. We will have a town hall meeting. You will definitely be invited to that. I want to do some online work as well, where we will say, you've hosted us for 4 years now. What do we have to share with you? And we can put all this information together. And some of it might be, it costs too much, you can't have it. That's going to be me. And some of it might be, here's something really new. And maybe you want to think about it. And hopefully there will be interest. Maybe some of those financiers that I said, people with money,
Yes.
might say, here's something that we're willing to invest in. And
But that would be interesting when that income is to, I don't know, do the big businesses in Worcester, because there are some really big businesses here, do they know about this thing that's been going on?
I hope so. We've tried to keep informed. We've tried to be profile.
But to get those owners, because a lot of them are like, they live in the suburbs next to us. We know they've got multi-million rand businesses. Get them into a meeting or into that presentation.
So we're going to try as many ways as possible. My Afrikaans is baie swak omdat ek kom van Durban. Maar ek het probeer en ek was op what's the Valley Radio.
Yeah, you were on Valley Radio.
I was on Valley Radio and I did the whole interview in Afrikaans, which I was very proud of myself. I thought I'm finally become a Weskaper. I'm no longer a Durban boy.
There you go.
But I think we really are hoping, and yes, it's. I've become to love Worcester, but what I'm hoping is in doing that we could say, now why don't you try this in Bloemfontein? Why don't you try this in Nailstroom? Because if we can demonstrate that that it could work, then hopefully others can say, well, that maybe there's something here, maybe there's something which can be done.
Well, it's incredible. I think we're very lucky. Worcester is very lucky that you made the choice to do this here. It's very unusual to do a study, as you've said, of a place and the food systems in a place, not a sector, as you explained. And it's very exciting to think that out of this might come something really special and unusual. Because and we look forward to hearing about it.
To add to that, it's if you look around Worcester, if you look at Robertson, if you ask anybody. If you ask most people in Cape Town, who's of middle class and higher, if you could go away for a weekend, where would you go? I always joke and I say the Cape Townians only know 2 mountains. It's Table Mountain and Cedarburg. But they know McGregor. What's it other town? Greyton. They know Elgin, which is Grabouw. They know that. McGregor, the other one, Robertson.
Yes.
And that's basically where it stops. And then there's Ceres when it snows. And of all of them, from the ones that I've, for 4 of them, you have to drive through Worcester.
Yes, and on a Friday like today,
yes,
the highway, the middle traffic light off the N1, the cars are queuing to drive from the N1 through Worcester down towards Robertson and that direction. But they pass through Worcester. So it'll be very good if Worcester could develop something new and exciting and provide food systems. I mean, we have, if you think about the traditional way that we shop, we go to the grocery store and we buy that. That's, when I say we, probably middle class people. That's the way. And occasionally, if you had like a church fete or something like that, you would go there and they would be selling very specific things. But a farmer's market
and they're popping up.
I think a farmer's market would be fantastic. And if there were a vegetable, like a proper commercial fresh produce centre, it would be the obvious place to put a farmer's market.
Right. Because it will service so far. It will service all the way from Tilburg, Ceres, right up through to Beaufort West.
And how often we were just chatting to somebody who produces stone fruit the other day. They were saying, for stone fruit to get into a supermarket in Worcester, it first has to get sold and has to go to Epping, to the municipal market, or to the DC at wherever. And then it gets trucked back to Worcester. So if you want to go and buy your own stuff in the shop, it first has to do a trip to Cape Town and back.
Yep. One of my great delights when I traveled to this area and then I go back to Cape Town, is I will go to the farm stall outside of Worcester. You will know the one I'm talking about. Actually, we
Yes.
can give them a pumpoon style.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Yes.
can go to pumpoon style and I can buy 60 Rand of figs, and it's a case, a huge case. And then I'm tempted to take that case and go back to Cape Town and sell it to my neighbor for 70 Rand. But I slap myself on the hand and say, I take 2 and I sell it for 60 Rand. But, you've got an area where you can buy beautiful fresh figs.
Yeah.
And restaurants in Cape Town are charging you a fortune to have
Yeah, it's how it works.
a dessert or a start. I mean,
It's simple. Take it restaurants. How many restaurants does Worcester have? Take away the chain restaurants that's sitting in the mall. There's 2. And then there's a couple of some of the wine farms around and a coffee shop here and there. It's
How many does Robertson have? Lots.
lots. And it's so weird that it doesn't. Again, I go back because I've just come back from there. We get into Nailstrom and they say, right, we can have some lunch quickly. Walk into a place and it's like, look at this. Just the children's, because I've got small kids, the children's play area is massive. There's like a track, like a racetrack where they can go with little scooter bikes around, and it's incredible. Why can't something like that work here?
a little anecdote from today while I was walking. Again, one of my Belgian colleagues said to me, well, what's the cuisine? What's the culinary tradition of
Braai.
And I said to him, I'm actually puzzling about that. Because if you look at one of the things I needed to do was also understand the history of Worcester. If you look at the history of Worcester in actually quite recent history, there's been waves of Italian settlers. There have been people coming from Pomerania and Germany. There have been people from France. There have been people from all over the world that have come here. But little sign of the
culture.
of their culinary tradition. If you go to a small town in Midwest America, there'll still be a Swedish Day celebration. The Italians will still have Italian Day. You will see signs of the cuisine left. And I wondered what happened. You can still see Malay cuisine, but don't see...
Not really in like where you can go and buy Malay food, really.
No.
Yeah.
But, I wondered what happened to the Italian families, what happened to the German families. Obviously they assimilated, but then surely someone in Worcester will remember making the Italian biscuits. Someone must have made German cakes.
Lasagna.
Yeah, lasagna.
Yeah.
And I said to him, where I've seen signs of Worcester's cuisine is in your local spa. Again, I can name that because we didn't do ethics with it. In the local spa. But at the food counter in the spa, I noticed you can get pumpkin fritters. You can get breadies. You can see signs of that. And yet you don't easily find that in the restaurants.
Yes.
I remember coming to Worcester in my 20s, and there used to be the KWV wine house.
Yes.
We had some quite swish fancy restaurants at one point. But I think the earning power and the spending power is not there. And, I think things have changed a lot. And the number of people that can really afford to go to restaurants out of the whole population, it is what it is. Julian, I think we need to start kind of wrapping things up a little. We've been chatting.
We can go for a very long time.
We can, exactly. But is there any of this research being used by government or anyone else?
Yes, we're seeing signs. It's hard when you're a researcher to say, I can claim, I can say I can attribute that to my research. I do know, as an example, that the 5th Integrated Development Plan for the Breda Valley Municipality talks about food security, where the previous one did not. There's a comprehensive discussion on climate change, where there was a very short discussion last time. So I'm seeing signs in some of the local policy articles. I do know that the Western Cape government now has what they call a Nourish to Flourish strategy, which is recognizing that you need to nourish your farming sector to be able to nourish your population. So it's recognizing the integration of the food, the production of food, and the health that comes from consuming it. So I feel there's something there. I do know that there's talk about feeding in early childhood development centers, which wasn't really being talked about. And one of the most dramatic things I think was dramatic, when we first arrived and we said, what about smallholder production in Worcester? Is there any? And they spoke about maybe 1 or 2 people. The most recent meeting I went to, which was in Zwelathemba, and they'd invited the people who own all those goats and cows that you see around the edge of Worcester, because they were starting to say, hang on, there's something here. This is actually, it's a tremendous resource that we need to think about. It's not just something we need to control. We need to understand who owns these.
And someone's looking after them and someone's eating them.
Absolutely. So there's a farming sector in Worcester that has never really been thought about.
Urban farming.
An urban farming system, and some of it is people that have moved from other parts of South Africa and they brought their farming traditions here. But if someone's looking after it, someone's got a livelihood.
Yes.
That's one person less that we need to think, where's their job?
So it's an informal sector that is not always recognized, as you say.
And there was no discussion about that 2 years ago. And now I hear, we're having a meeting with the smallholder livestock. I hope that we played some role in that.
Pretty sure that must have happened, if these things are happening. So well done on that. And then finally, as a National Planning Commissioner, what are your hopes and concerns for the agricultural sector and for South Africa's food system?
I think one of the big things that we need to get to grips with, we have a master plan for the agriculture sector. There had been agreement around this, and yet we're not seeing it being implemented. And I think we need to go back and understand how can we ensure that that master plan moves off paper and things are actually happening. Which roles need to be asked to deliver. I think I've mentioned my concern about it. How do we leverage the money that there is in South Africa, which the government doesn't have? How do we leverage it so that it's invested in our country and it generates jobs and it generates prosperity? I'm tired of being a poverty researcher. I want to be a wealth researcher. And that's ultimately my hope.
Then you're going to start selling policies as well.
No, and let's hope that happens. Let's hope that wealth does pick up. It is possible. It's not impossible.
Yep, I hope so.
I do believe there's hope. I think there's a lot of hope.
And I've got a lot of hope.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you very much. We have a tradition, and that's a closing tradition where we ask you a question, which was from one of our previous people that we interviewed, completely random question, and we will ask you one for the next person. So this is, Dewald's got the question for you.
Okay. Between the time you entered your profession, what has been your skill that you have used most to your benefit that you did not expect, and vice versa?
For me, learning to learn. I thought at some point I could say, you've studied so far, you've got these degrees, you know stuff, you've learnt. What I've needed, the skill that I realized that I didn't expect to carry on using was to be able to learn again and learn again and learn again. So the latest thing I'm fighting with is to get, how am I going to use this artificial intelligence to actually be intelligent? And I'm working now on, frequently going back to my computer and saying, all right, let's do this again, because the last answers you gave me were really stupid, and you're supposed to be intelligent. And so that's my current learning yes. How to learn, learning how to teach a computer to learn. Thank you.
Nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Julian, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us. We've really enjoyed it. Thank you.